In the bustling and noisy city of Lagos, where everyone is rushing through their own lives, a small act of kindness can change the course of a destiny, just like how a poor girl's life was transformed with nothing but a smile and a kind heart. Her name was Lucy. Lucy had no family, no one to rely on. She was an orphan, a child left to walk a difficult path that life had laid out for her. After the tragic death of her parents in a car accident, Lucy had to face a life full of challenges and hardships. She lived in a small, cramped room with no windows, its cracked walls the only companions she had. Whenever it rained, water seeped through the cracks and dripped onto the floor, slowly filling containers she placed around the room to catch the rain. This miserable and lonely feeling became a part of Lucy's everyday life. However, she would not let herself be defeated by adversity. Lucy's life was not like anyone else's. For her, every day was a struggle for survival. Working at a supermarket in the city was far from her dream job, but it was the only way she could afford to live. Lucy was a janitor, a job that no one else in the supermarket wanted. Every day she cleaned the aisles, wiped down the shelves, and helped customers when they needed it. Although the work wasn't glamorous, Lucy always performed her tasks with dedication and care. She took pride in doing every job, no matter how small, to the best of her ability. She knew that every task she did not only help keep the supermarket clean, but also earned her enough money to maintain her modest life in her dingy little room. These were tough days for Lucy. She often couldn't afford the things she needed, from clothes to food. Every morning before heading to work, her breakfast was simple sometimes, just a slice of bread or a cup of milk. Despite the hardships, Lucy never gave up. She refused to let herself fall into despair. When starting a new day, she always smiled, even if it was only a faint smile. It was her way of reminding herself that life wasn't always easy, but she had to keep going. Lucy had once dreamed of becoming a doctor. She wanted to help people like herself, to be someone who could save lives and bring hope to those in need. But that dream was shattered when her parents passed away. She couldn't afford to continue her studies at university, and with no financial support, her aspirations came to an abrupt halt. Every night, sitting alone in her empty room, she would think back to the happy days with her parents, and tears would fall. But even then, she didn't let sadness consume her. Lucy understood that life must go on, and she could only change her fate by refusing to give up. As Lucy's life continued to revolve around long, exhausting days at the supermarket, little did she know that a big change was coming. Each day she went about her cleaning duties in the bustling supermarket in Lagos, a city that never slept, where people were always in a hurry and had little time to care for one another. Lucy became an indispensable part of that busy landscape. She cleaned the shelves, swept the aisles, and never let her personal struggles affect her work. She wasn't just a janitor. She was also the person always willing to help customers, whether it was a simple greeting or guiding them to find the items they needed. One afternoon, as the supermarket began to empty out, an elderly woman walked in. She wore an old dress, its color faded with time, but what stood out the most were the weariness and loneliness in her eyes. Her white hair was neatly tied up, yet it was clear she had lived through many hardships. Her steps were slow but steady, as if some hidden strength was pushing her forward despite her age and the deep wrinkles on her face. Lucy noticed her entering and immediately greeted her with a gentle smile. Every day she faced cold, indifferent glances from the hurried customers passing by, but she always made an effort to keep her smile as a sign of warmth. The woman, Mrs. Agnes, smiled back in return. She walked straight to the oil section, picked up a small bottle of oil, and made her way to the checkout. As she placed the oil bottle on the counter, Lucy noticed that the woman's gaze wasn't just unfamiliar, but there was a sense of confusion, of uncertainty in her eyes. Lucy continued her work, but when she glanced over, she saw Mrs. Agnes rummaging through her handbag, pulling out an old worn wallet. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the small change inside, seemingly trying to find enough money to pay. "I'm sorry, dear. I seem to have forgotten my purse." Mrs. Agnes whispered, her voice weak, as if she didn't want anyone to hear. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and her hands shakily placed the bottle of oil back on the counter. The cashier, without a word, glanced at her coldly, waving her away. "If you don't have the money, don't stand here. This isn't a charity." The cashier said, her voice impatient, even contemptuous. Mrs. Agnes lowered her gaze, a tear slipping down her cheek. The cashier didn't even seem to notice, continuing with her work as the line of customers grew. Mrs. Agnes stood alone, unnoticed and uncared for in the midst of the bustling crowd. No one paid attention to her pain or the embarrassment she was enduring. At that moment, Lucy saw the scene unfold from across the room. She could feel the sadness in Mrs. Agnes's eyes and couldn't stand by and do nothing. Without hesitation, she walked up to the counter and interrupted the cashier. "I'll pay for her," Lucy said softly but firmly. She turned to Mrs. Agnes, offering her a reassuring smile and saying, "Don't worry, you don't need to worry about this." The sight left Mrs. Agnes stunned. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, unable to believe what she had just heard. Lucy opened her purse, took out a bill, and handed it to the cashier. The cashier looked at Lucy and then at Mrs. Agnes, a little surprised but saying nothing. "You don't need to worry about the change. Keep it," Lucy said to the cashier before turning back to Mrs. Agnes. Mrs. Agnes stood there, her eyes still filled with tears, looking at Lucy with a gaze full of gratitude and appreciation. She could not say anything except two words. "Thank you, dear. Thank you so much." From that moment, Mrs. Agnes seemed lighter, as if the weight in her heart had lifted a little. Her steps seemed a bit more graceful, as though the sadness had been eased even just a little by the kindness of a stranger. Mrs. Agnes, a wealthy and powerful woman, lived in a luxurious mansion but lacked joy in her life. Since the death of her husband, she had fallen into loneliness, with no source of comfort or encouragement from anyone. Despite her vast fortune and high social status, she always felt an emptiness in her soul. Her only son Felix was the sole heir to her vast estate, but he also lived in his own world, one consumed by career and power. His life revolved around business deals, meetings in boardrooms where money and influence were the only measures of success. Mrs. Agnes shared with Felix the story of Lucy, a poor girl who had helped her during a difficult moment at the supermarket, and Felix couldn't help but be moved. Although he had everything at his disposal, power, wealth, and reputation, Felix felt that his life lacked something very important, a real connection with the people around him. His life revolved around contracts, business decisions, and meetings where money and power were the only standards of success. But the story of Lucy made him begin to question himself and what he had been seeking in life. Suddenly, Felix realized that Lucy, despite her tough life and humble job as a janitor at the supermarket, possessed a virtue he had never seen in the people of his world. Felix's world had always been one where everything was measured by money and power, where kindness was sometimes overlooked. But Lucy was different. She lived for human values, not for personal gain, and that made Felix take notice. Determined to understand more about this girl, Felix decided to find a way to meet Lucy. He didn't want to hear about her from his mother. He wanted to assess and get to know the person Mrs. Agnes had described with such deep emotion. However, Felix was not one to be drawn to people from lower social ranks, but his curiosity about Lucy made him step out of his comfort zone. Felix started visiting the supermarket where Lucy worked, not as the CEO of a large corporation, but as an ordinary customer. Every time he entered the store, he watched her from a distance. Lucy always worked diligently with a gentle smile on her face, despite the fact that her job was to clean the shelves, sweep the aisles, and assist customers with their shopping. No complaints, no sign of fatigue showed in her demeanor. Every time he saw her work, Felix felt a strange sensation in his heart, as if there was something extraordinary about her that he had never felt before. That feeling became even more evident when Felix noticed that despite her difficult life, Lucy lacked neither dignity nor integrity. She didn't work merely for money, she worked because she believed in the value of helping others. She treated everyone well, from customers to colleagues, never once acting arrogantly or allowing her hardships to defeat her. One day, Felix decided to approach Lucy, but not as a man of power. He wanted to understand the girl his mother had spoken of. Felix walked up to Lucy's counter and began, "Thank you for helping my mother the other day. She told me about you and your actions really impressed me." Lucy looked up at Felix, not surprised, just offering a gentle smile. "It's nothing, sir. I just do what I think is right." Lucy's response, though simple, carried a great strength that made Felix feel a deep sense of respect for her. Felix stood quietly for a moment, feeling the vast difference between himself and Lucy. With all his power and wealth, he had never been able to treat people naturally and sincerely like she did. From that moment, Felix realized that his life was lacking true values. He had spent his life chasing fame and money, but had never known that true happiness lay elsewhere. As time went by, Felix grew more and more connected to Lucy. He began to realize that love and kindness were not things that could be bought, but values that people had to build for themselves. He understood that Lucy was the one who had opened his eyes to a world he had never been aware of, a world where small, kind actions could change someone's life. One day, as Lucy was cleaning an area in the supermarket, she accidentally noticed something unusual. While tidying up near the checkout counter, she saw a familiar saleswoman engaging with a customer. However, instead of charging the customer the listed price, the saleswoman was charging more than the actual cost of the item. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. It had become a habit. Lucy noticed that the saleswoman frequently did this, especially with customers who were distracted or didn't know the correct price of the product. As a janitor, Lucy had no authority to intervene directly in the supermarket's transactions. However, the unfairness and dishonesty of the situation made it impossible for her to ignore. Lucy felt a rising anger as she thought of the innocent customers being deceived because of their lack of knowledge. She knew this could not continue, and if no one spoke up, many others would be hurt by these fraudulent actions. Although she knew this was not her job, Lucy couldn't stand by. She decided to find a way to report the incident to someone in authority, but how could she prove the fraud without being seen as an unreasonable whistleblower? She began gathering small pieces of evidence, recording the times and transactions she witnessed. Whenever she had the chance, Lucy observed the saleswoman's transactions, closely ensuring that the dishonest behavior wasn't just an isolated incident. A week later, Lucy decided to share her findings with Felix, Mrs. Agnes's son. Felix, the CEO of a large corporation, had extensive connections and the ability to influence the supermarket's management. Although Lucy was initially hesitant, she knew that only Felix with his influence could help her expose the truth. She didn't want to handle this alone, as, without concrete evidence, she might be dismissed as a baseless accuser. Felix, after hearing Lucy's account, was deeply impressed by her courage and determination. He was not only a man of power, but also someone with a sense of responsibility to protect fairness. Felix decided to help Lucy and began gathering information from various sources. He investigated the supermarket's transactions, checked receipts, and examined the questionable sales records. After some time, they both discovered that this was not just one employee's act of dishonesty, but a scheme involving several people at the supermarket who had been taking advantage of customers to pocket the extra money. Feeling that the matter was clear, Felix and Lucy decided to expose the fraud. They reported it to the supermarket's management and provided evidence of the illegal activities. After an investigation, the management confirmed that the group of employees had exploited customers' ignorance by charging them higher prices and pocketing the difference. These employees had deceived not only the customers, but also other people within the supermarket, compromising the business's transparency and fairness. As a result, the fraudulent employees were fired, and the supermarket underwent a revamp of its sales process. To protect customers' rights and maintain public trust, the supermarket implemented stricter management measures and increased employee training on professional ethics. Lucy and Felix's actions marked a crucial turning point not only in their careers, but also in the lives of the customers who had been deceived. They felt that justice had been served, and those who had been harmed finally received fairness. Lucy's brave actions not only helped her expose the fraud, but also opened up new opportunities for her. She proved that no matter how humble the job, anyone can make a change if they have the resilience and determination. Meanwhile, Felix also realized that sometimes the most important lessons in life don't come from earning money or power, but from protecting human values, fighting for fairness, and spreading kindness. After witnessing Lucy's admirable actions and kindness, Mrs. Agnes felt a profound change within herself. Throughout the years she had spent living alone after her late husband passed away, she had stopped believing in the sincerity of people. She had lived in a world where everything was calculated, where every relationship was influenced by money and power. But Lucy, the poor janitor at the supermarket, made her see life differently. She had never encountered a young person who could live with such selfless goodness, expecting nothing in return. Surely Lucy was a rare soul in a world full of calculation. Mrs. Agnes couldn't forget Lucy's gentle smile, the way she helped her without expecting anything in return. This act not only warmed her heart, but also made her realize the absence of genuine human connection in her own life. Although she could easily offer material help to others, the selfless giving from the heart like Lucy's was something Mrs. Agnes had not experienced in years. The next day, Mrs. Agnes decided to return to the supermarket to find Lucy. She knew that this girl deserved not just help, but also a chance to change her life. She couldn't let Lucy continue to live in poverty. Mrs. Agnes walked straight to the counter where Lucy usually worked. Lucy was cleaning her face, still smiling, maintaining a friendly attitude towards all customers, even though there was no doubt that she was tired inside. Mrs. Agnes walked up to her and gently patted her shoulder. "You have a beautiful heart, Lucy." Mrs. Agnes began, her voice warm but filled with emotion. "I can't let you live like this. You deserve a better life. Let me help you." Lucy looked up surprised to see Mrs. Agnes coming to find her. She said nothing, just smiled faintly as if to say thank you. But Mrs. Agnes continued, "You helped me without expecting anything. That touched me deeply. I want to help you go back to school, to help you become the person you've always dreamed of." Those words left Lucy feeling conflicted. She had never imagined that one day she would receive help from anyone, especially from someone she had just met. Lucy had always told herself that she had to do everything on her own, to stand firm and carve out her own path. Mrs. Agnes's offer, though, made with kindness, made her feel a little uneasy. She feared that if she accepted this help, she would no longer be able to stand on her own. "Thank you very much for your kindness, but I can't accept your help just like that," Lucy replied, her voice soft but firm. "I want to overcome this challenge on my own, to work hard to achieve what I truly deserve." Mrs. Agnes looked into Lucy's eyes, not with anger or sadness, but with admiration for the resilience she saw there. She understood that Lucy was someone who didn't want to depend on anyone, and this only made Mrs. Agnes respect her even more. However, Mrs. Agnes did not give up on her intention to help Lucy. She knew the best way to help was to create an opportunity for Lucy to stand on her own feet. With this resolve, Mrs. Agnes offered another suggestion. "Would you like to go back to school? I can help with your tuition so you can continue your education and pursue your dream of becoming a doctor. I believe you can do it, and I want to help you make it happen." Upon hearing Mrs. Agnes's offer, Lucy felt a mix of emotions. She had always dreamed of studying medicine, but her circumstances and lack of financial resources had stopped that dream. However, accepting Mrs. Agnes's help was not simple for Lucy. She didn't want to become a burden to anyone, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the only opportunity life had offered her. After thinking it over for some time, Lucy finally decided to accept Mrs. Agnes's help. However, she insisted that Mrs. Agnes only assist with her tuition and related educational expenses, and she would support herself through her own work. She didn't want anyone to think she was relying on others to achieve her dream. Mrs. Agnes was overjoyed when she heard Lucy's decision to accept her help. She understood that assisting someone wasn't just about giving money, it was about offering them an opportunity to stand on their own and prove themselves. Mrs. Agnes didn't expect anything in return. She simply wanted Lucy to have the chance to achieve her dreams.